Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first edition of Auburn Sports Talk with Ryan Black. Of course, I'm with Auburn Undercover, the 247 sports site. And I'm going to basically, for the first, 5, 10 minutes or so, I'm just going to run down Auburn's football roster coming out of the spring and give you my opinion on how I think it's going to turn out when they open the season against Clemson in September. Of course, I know the question that I'm going to get immediately, so again, I'm going to address it right now. Who I think is going to be the starting quarterback? I think it's going to be John Franklin III. I'm certainly not going to be the first person here that said this, and I won't be the last. But you don't bring in a guy like John Franklin III, who is a junior college transfer, and not expect him to play immediately. That just doesn't happen. I mean, I know Auburn actually has one guy on the roster who's a junior college transfer who this kind of happened to is Xavier Dampier. Now, again, he got stuck behind Reese Dismukes when he first got here, and then last year Austin Golson stepped over and moved into center, but now he's now left tackle. Which again, I'll address that in a second. But I just think when it comes down to it, John Franklin's the guy who gives them that extra dimension that they've been missing since Nick Marshall left the program. And we'll see. Again, I'm not sure if he's ever going to be a super accurate passer. I mean, I wasn't all that impressed with him in the spring game in that regard, but one of the things in the spring game, you can never make too much of it. I don't think, let's say if he'd gone out and looked great, and thrown for 200 yards and run for 200 more, then people would have probably said, man, the defense looks terrible. I'm really worried about the defense. So I think you can only make small judgments off the spring game, especially at quarterback where they weren't even allowed to go live in that. I think the guy that will end up being the backup is Sean White. I personally think if he hadn't got hurt last year, I don't even think John Franklin III would be on campus. I think he would have cemented himself as a starter. But again, when you get injured, there are going to be questions about his durability, which I think a little bit is unfair. But and I think the other thing is, too, people only want to remember his last performance, which obviously was very rough in the Birmingham Bowl. But, go back and look before that. He had 3 straight games of 250-plus yards passing, which was the first Auburn quarterback to do that since Damian Craig. And I just really think that if he'd been able to stay healthy last year, he would have basically held down the job, and there wouldn't be any controversy right now. So moving over from quarterback, I'm going to go to running back. I think there's no question that Javon Robinson's going to be the starter. I mean, you guys, if you watched the spring game, or if you either if you were there in person or if you watched it later on television, something like that, you saw that Rock Thomas actually played a lot more in the slot than he did traditional running back. I wouldn't be surprised if you see him in like a 50-50 role there, because I never thought, as much as the coaches and teammates and players tried to say it, I don't think he was ever going to be the starting running back in the regards that he wasn't going to be like Peyton Barber was last year. He wasn't going to be like Cameron Artis-Payne 2 years ago, or, of course, Trey Mason, where he's just not built to carry the ball 20 or 30, or, of course, back when Trey Mason in the SEC Championship 46 times in one game. He's just not built that way. I mean, he hasn't stayed healthy, and I just don't think that's the role they're going to have for him. So I think some slot receiver kind of mixed in with the role that you saw Corey Grant play 2 years ago, that's kind of where you're going to see Rock Thomas fit in. And, hey, you saw him make some good catches in the spring game, especially a very acrobatic one for a touchdown from Jeremy Johnson in the third quarter. So, again, he's got some natural receiving ability that I think they're really going to be able to take advantage of. Moving over to H-back, that to me is the toughest call on the entire team as far as who I think is going to get the start. Because, you've got a redshirt freshman in Cameron Petway, and you also got Chandler Cox, who enrolled early last year. Both of them did really good things this spring, and it seems like the coaches and teammates think both of them are going to play a lot. And so it's almost like I don't think it's really going to matter who starts, because I think they're both going to work in and eventually get a good bit of playing time. As far as if you're going to press me on and ask me to pick one or the other, I'm going to say Chandler Cox. I mean, if you guys saw him this spring game, he had a very big run. We obviously heard a lot about his athleticism kind of high school, because when he played there in Apopka, Florida, he actually played quarterback for their team a good bit. So he's a guy that he's maybe not your typical H-back fullback mold where he's just this big physical guy and that's all he can do. I mean, he's got some real athleticism that I think he'll be able to take advantage of. At tight end, I think Landon Rice, the early enrollee, is going to be the guy who ends up getting the start. Jalen Mitchell, has been here for a year, but I just feel like, with Landon Rice, he's a guy that kind of gives him a little bit more versatility as far as the size and the blocking ability that maybe they want to see more. Moving over to the offensive line, it looks like they're at the end of spring that after moving over from center, Austin Golson nailed down left tackle. Obviously, left guard is going to be Alex Kozan. Right guard should be Braden Smith. Center, as I discussed a minute ago, Xavier Dampier. After again, he's been here for a couple of years now. He's kind of been waiting for his opportunity. And then right tackle. That's really the one spot where you could maybe say it's up in the air. I mean, because they've got multiple candidates there. As far as who I think is going to win it, I think if he can show the consistency they would like, I think Darius James could win it back. But right now I think that's the one position on the offensive line I would say is really too close to call. Robert Leff obviously is going to be given a shot there too. And people, hey, I'm sorry, I'm seeing all the comments. I'm going to get to them after I kind of run down through my roster stuff. So I'll be hitting that. I don't know as much about recruiting. Keith did his one earlier. He's the guru on that. If I know an answer to what your question is, I'll give it. But I don't want to tell you wrong information. That would be bad on me. That wouldn't help you at all, obviously, either. And let me see. So I was talking about offensive line. Mike Horton's another guy who can maybe work in there at right tackle. If you guys remember, he was actually, even though he redshirted, he was listed as the backup to Avery Young the entire season. And if something had happened bad enough to Avery where they felt like they would have needed to take the red shirt off, they would have done that. So that's all the offensive positions I've rattled off. Oh, I'm sorry, except receiver. There I think the one guarantee is you're going to see Marcus Davis start. Elsewhere, I mean, they've got Tony Stevens. He's a guy that we've heard about for a long time. He was a freshman when I first got on the beat in 2013, and he's that guy. It just seems like every year you kind of hear Tony's about to break out. Tony's about to break out. And people, writers, and obviously the fan base is waiting to see if that'll happen. This is his last go round. This is his last shot. So we'll see if he can do that. I mean, obviously Kyle Davis, who wasn't able to participate in any actual contact this spring, the early enrollee from Georgia. He got rave reviews from everybody. I mean, because you talk to whoever you want to, they've all said that he's the most physically impressive freshman receiver they've ever seen. So he's a guy that I just think the fact that he was able to already get in on campus, get some weight training done, and at least get some drills and things like that. Even though it wasn't contact, he wasn't able to do much of that in that regard. I think that's going to bode well for him. Elsewhere, can Stanton Truitt stay healthy? 2 years in a row, he's had season-ending shoulder surgeries, but he's a guy that might be the quickest guy on the team. And if they can find a way to get the ball to him, obviously they'll try to do that. Jason Smith's a guy who, after he arrived last spring, meaning spring of 2015, as a quarterback, quickly moved to receiver, and he's a guy that, it was kind of a running joke on the beat last year that every week Gus Malzahn and Rhett Lashlee would say, we got to find a way to get the ball to him, and it just basically never happened. So we'll see if they can find a way to get him worked in the rotation. We heard a lot of great things about Ryan Davis this spring, who was a freshman last year. He's maybe the smallest guy on the team size-wise, but again, kind of like right there with Stanton, he might be the fastest guy on the team outside of, we've heard a lot about John Franklin's speed, and obviously you guys know Rudy Ford is up there too when it comes to just straight line, 40 times. Darius Slayton, another guy who redshirted last year, is a guy who seems to have made a lot of strides. He's a guy that I'll be honest, with last year's recruiting class, I honestly thought he was going to come in and step in immediately and get a lot of playing time. Now, whether that was because he didn't pick up the playbook quickly enough, or whether it was because it got to the point in the season where they're like, you know what, this guy's too talented to waste a red shirt now. Let's keep him for next year. But he's a guy that, if you just look at the measurables and what he can do, his size, speed, everything like that, he looks like he's got some Sammy Coates potential. Now, obviously, you don't want to place too much pressure on a guy like that. And you would think, the one thing that Sammy battled, and he's still battling right now at the NFL level with the Steelers, he's got to work on consistency with his hands. So we'll see Slayton when he finally gets out there this fall, what he actually looks like. Moving over to the defense, starting with the defensive line, man, oh man, where do you start? The deepest unit on the team, in my opinion. I think the starters come game one, obviously Carl Lawson's going to be one. Montravius Adams should be one. And then after that, everything's pretty much up for grabs. You've got Devereaux Lawrence, who, ask any coach out there, any player, could say he's maybe the most talented guy on the team, regardless of position. You've got Dontavius Russell coming back. You've got Byron Cowart, who's one of the top-ranked players in the country last year. Didn't do a lot, but we've heard he's made progress. And then obviously Marlon Davis, in the early enrollee, from Greenville, Alabama, started the A-Day game with the first team. So, and then you kind of go down the line from there. Maurice Swain, Antoine Jackson was another early enrollee. They'll be bringing in Derek Brown, who I interviewed yesterday over in Sugar Hill, Georgia. It's Linear High School. It's in that, if you guys know Georgia, that area, it's Sugar Hill, Buford, Sewanee. They're kind of all in this little area. But it's actually, I think, a Sugar Hill address on the school. And then they're also bringing in Nick Coe, who is another highly regarded guy from North Carolina, state championship wrestler. And another guy who will count as part of this class at defensive line, but obviously he won't play immediately, is Tashawn Manning, who got diagnosed with cancer. He's supposed to enroll in 2017, and he's kind of on the Sean Coleman timetable, where again he's got to get cleared from his cancer first, and again they feel like this is a cancer that's easily beatable. It's not something that's going to end his career, but at the moment it's going to be on pause. So, but I'm just saying, you kind of throw some names in a hat on defensive line. John Tavius Johnson, I didn't mention him. You throw names in a hat with the defensive line, and you could come up with a great lineup any way you look at it. Paul James, I probably should have mentioned him too. He was technically listed as a linebacker, but I think he's going to end up playing down the line. And he was one of the top-ranked JUCO pass rushers in the country last year. Originally was from Illinois, so he's got some Division I experience. And we'll see again, because he was slowed by a foot injury when he first got to Auburn, so he wasn't able to maybe do things as quickly as everyone else. So we'll see once he gets healed up completely this summer and then returns for preseason camp, whether he's able to show a little bit more of what he can do, along with another guy in the same kind of role. Jeff Holland came to Auburn, 2015 signed. He's a linebacker, and he's gained weight, and he's playing down there in the defensive line now. Moving over to linebacker, I would say is the one unit where it seems like there's probably the most question marks. The one thing I'm very confident about that, kind of like with the Marcus Davis on the offensive side of the ball at receiver, the one guy I feel positive about at linebacker is Trey Williams, junior, a guy who basically said, hey, I want to be viewed as the leader of this defense, and I think a lot of the guys on the team already view him that way. And then who's going to start beside him? It could be Darrell Williams. It could be his fellow Mobile area friend and teammate Deshaun Davis. It could be T.J. Neal, who's a grad transfer, will be coming in from Illinois. Richard McBride, we didn't hear a lot about him this spring, so it seems like he's got a lot of ground to make up. Trey Threet, a early enrollee, we didn't hear a lot about him either. So it seems like those two guys are going to be guys that you're thinking are playing a little bit from behind. And then Montavious Atkinson, who was originally a defensive back, has moved over to linebacker. And it seems like he picked up things pretty well, but he's not a guy at the moment, barring a great preseason camp. He's not a guy that I think is going to end up getting a starting job. But again, hey, you never want to rule anything out, because if guys come back from the summer and they were training with themselves and they're able to now, of course, get that 20 hours a week of kind of the coaching that the NCAA passed a couple of years ago. Hey, Atkinson can maybe end up working himself into a much bigger part of the playing rotation. So we'll see. And then finally, moving over to the secondary, I think the two corner spots are going to be Jamel Dean and obviously Carlton Davis, who we didn't get to see in the spring game. He was held out, due to an injury he suffered earlier in the week. But it's, we've heard it's very minor. He should be fine. Safety, obviously, Rudy Ford is going to be one of the starters. And then, else, will either be him or, nickel. He can play either one. Because the other guys in the mix at safety, is Nick Ruffin, who, kind of with the last coaching staff had kind of been left for dead in a way, because, he got a good bit of playing time at the beginning of the season in 2015. Then he went through a 3-game stretch where he didn't play at all. But this new coaching staff, Wesley McGriff specifically, the new defensive backs coach, seems to really like him a lot. Stephen Roberts, who came on really strong at the end of last season, is going to have a chance to work into the mix too. And then, of course, Trey Matthews, who was out the entire spring, after having off-season shoulder surgery. He's going to be in there. So they've obviously got a lot of, names that could be thrown out there. Josh Holsey will be coming back, as we know. And, he's, and I even asked, we met with Kevin Steele, the defensive coordinator, for his last media availability this spring. I'm like, do you know enough about Holsey yet to even know whether you want to play him at safety or corner? Because he's played both in his Auburn career. And he's like, well, the main thing is he's in the room. He knows what we're doing. And we'll see once he actually can get out there on the field and do stuff. We'll see how we can kind of work him into the mix. So, again, they've got a lot of different, lot of talent, kind of everywhere. And so now I'm going to look at some of the questions, guys. So, and thank you for sticking with me through this. Let's see. What's the first question we got here? Lee Ernest, is he more concerned with linebackers? Hey, I kind of touched on that. Again, if someone asked me point blank, Ryan, what do you think is the biggest question mark on the team? Yeah, I would say it has to be linebackers, because again, Darrell Williams is the only guy on campus, again, not counting T.J. Neal, who's played a lot at Illinois. Trey Williams is the only guy who's had a good bit of playing time. Darrell Williams obviously didn't. Deshaun Davis hasn't. So they've got a lot of questions marked there. but they seem to have options, which is what you always want. Lee also again saying he thinks coaches probably use 25% or less of the playbook in the spring game. That's probably fair. That might not even be that much because again, they want to keep it as basic as possible. One, because they want to keep it simple. They want the offense to know just the base of what they run, on top of the fact that the defense knows what's coming. It's not like they're out there kind of reacting to stuff. I mean, they know what plays are being called because that's just the nature of spring games. And secondly, I mean, hey, all coaches are paranoid. Malzahn probably is one of the most very high on that list. Where he's not going to show anything for the fall that he would even want any opponents to be able to start getting some advanced film on, especially when it comes to John Franklin III, who may end up winning the starting job as I'm projecting at quarterback. Okay, let's see. What's the next question? How is Kozan's back from Lee again? Um, when we met with him last time this spring, he said he feels as close to what he did in 2013 as he has in a long time. And if you guys remember, that was his redshirt freshman season. Started every single game at left guard for Auburn and ended up being named a freshman All-American because of how well he performed. So obviously, hey, he played last year, but he's saying that he just thinks he wasn't able to weight train and do the physical kind of contact as much as he would have wanted heading into last season. So again, he feels like now, in a way, he's now back to where he wants to be. Coming off. Let me rephrase that. He basically now feels like he's where he was supposed to be at the end of the 2013 season. But then, like again, he got injured there in weight training back home in Colorado right after spring ended in 2014. Missed all of that season. Wasn't cleared for any contact last spring. And so, again, he basically kind of is saying last season was a bit of a wash for him, and now he's ready to start anew. Okay, Dustin Chinnis asked me about the QB situation, which I did address at the very beginning, but I'll talk about it again because obviously I understand, hey, that's what people want to hear about. Again, I think John Franklin III is going to win the job. Again, he's just the guy that out of the four quarterbacks who are on campus right now has the best, dual threat ability as far as if plays break down. He can make a lot happen with his feet, which is obviously what Nick Marshall was able to do, back when he led the team to the 2014 BCS championship game and the SEC title that year. Again, I think Sean White's going to end up as a backup. I'm not trying to at all sit here and say that Jeremy Johnson can't win it, and I know maybe for some fans that's the worst case scenario after what happened with him last year. But I just think if you guys look at the spring game, if you look back at how he played last year, I think Sean White was the most consistent of the quarterbacks who played. And I'm not trying to sit here and say that Tyler Queen can't somehow make a miraculous kind of charge from the back, but I mean he was hurt all of last season. After having Tommy John surgery, now he kind of got hurt again at the end of the spring, wasn't able to participate in the A-Day game. So you kind of have the three candidates that we've talked about a lot with, Sean White, John Franklin III, Jeremy Johnson, who are kind of far ahead of the other two. The other one, aside from Tyler Queen, being Woody Barrett, the incoming quarterback from Florida. He's a guy that obviously is a little bit more, I would say, if you guys don't know much about Woody Barrett, he's kind of a mix between Jeremy and John Franklin, where he's a bigger guy like Jeremy. I mean, 6'4", I think probably 225, but he's a little bit more mobile than Jeremy is. He's obviously not cat quick, the way that John Franklin is, but he's a guy that I think is a little more shifty than what Jeremy is. Probably can get to the edge a little quicker than that. So yeah, I mean that's again they're all again Auburn's got possibilities, but guys, I just unless Franklin gets hurt in preseason camp, I would be really shocked if he's not the starter come the Clemson game in the season opener. Let's see. Tony Blackburn says Sean White will get the starting job. Well, Tony, I mean, it's very possible. There's no question. I think that's a possibility. And hey, I think, again, I repeated it at the beginning, and I'll say it again. I think he was the best quarterback last year, and I think if he hadn't got hurt, he would, John Franklin might not be on campus because I think he would have been able to cement the job. But I think it's just the fact, the way he ended last year, maybe some of the questions about maybe his durability. I think that's why we are where we are right now, talking about the Auburn quarterback situation still not being settled coming out of the spring. Delane Harwood asked, what happens to the D-line if Lawson gets hurt? Oh, goodness. Well, we're talking about a defensive line that 2014 didn't have him at all, of course, because he got injured the last week of spring towards ACL, sat out the entire spring. Then last year missed him after the opener against Louisville in the Georgia Dome. Got hurt, had the hip pointer, missed the next 7 games. It came back against Ole Miss. But he said that, hey, I wasn't healthy the entire rest of the season after I came back. So what happens if he gets hurt? I'm not trying to say that Auburn shouldn't worry. Obviously, he's their best pass rusher. No one's going to dispute that. And he's probably their most disruptive force overall on defense. However, this defensive line on paper has a lot more depth than they've had at any point since the 2013 season. And in my opinion, again, because that was the first year I covered the team, this defensive line, especially when you bring in Derek Brown, you bring in Nick Coe in preseason camp, the last members of the 2016 class, I think this actually is a more talented group. Now, okay, the question is, it doesn't matter maybe how talented they are if they can't pressure the quarterback. Well, that's where Marlon Davidson's going to have to step in. That's where Paul James, again, who was one of the top JUCO pass rushers in the country last year, is going to have to step in. Jeff Holland and Byron Coward. I mean, hey, that's what they brought. That's what they bought Byron Coward on campus to do, was get after quarterbacks like Carl Lawson. So, I mean, I think they have more options now of rushing the passer than they have at any point since the 2013 season outside of Lawson. So let's see. Next question is, Clay Ingram asks, would you say Franklin is more accurate than Marshall when throwing intermediate to deep routes? Wow. Here's the thing, man. It's such a small sample size that we saw, at the A-Day game. And here's the other thing, when we were out at some of the open, quote unquote open portions of practice during the spring, it's not like we ever really got to see the quarterbacks really open up and do a lot of stuff. So I mean, I'm not trying to cop out and not answer your question, but really I haven't seen enough to say, whether he's more accurate than Marshall on the intermediate to deep routes. I think what'll be interesting to see too is we've heard from guys like Tony Stevens and Marcus Davis, people who were around when Nick Marshall was here, who say he has every bit as big an arm as Marshall did. I'm talking about just strength wise, which to me would speak volumes about Franklin's arm strength, because Marshall has the strongest arm I've ever seen in person. I never got to see Brett Favre. I never got to see Matthew Stafford. Guys you've heard, Aaron Rodgers, guys you've heard who have huge arms. But I sure would like to see, if this is the truth, if Franklin really does have as big an arm as Marshall, that's pretty impressive. Uh, ooh, Lee, that's a great question about how much time has JJ spent with the sports psychologist Auburn hired. That's a great question, which I really wish, now that, again, hindsight with the benefit here, I wish we'd asked that, because I think a lot of people would tell you that no one thinks that the problems that Jeremy Johnson had last year was anything to do with his physical ability. It's more that he lost confidence in himself kind of as the season went on. Especially the LSU game was a huge train wreck, and there's not really much you can say about anything in that regard. But hey, the defense had a bad game there too. With Leonard Fournette running all over them. So you don't want to place too much of the blame on just one guy there, but obviously the moment that kind of encapsulated Johnson's entire season last year was that LSU game, of course, where he lost the ball and fumbled it behind himself, 25 yards. But hey, remember too, in that game, he had probably maybe one of his biggest season highlights. He ran for a 75-yard touchdown in the second half. So, there's that. Let me see. Matt Rowland. Let me see. I don't think that's actually a question or a statement. The new true freshman, you're referring, of course, to Marlon Davidson, is going to be really good. That beat out Byron. Well, again, let's remember, guys, again, no position coming out of the spring is technically set in stone. The fact that Marlon started the spring game means that throughout the spring, they feel like he showed more consistency than Byron Coward. But to sit here and say right now that Byron Coward's not going to start is way too soon. I mean, that's ridiculous to say. William Charles Gunnings, that's how the QB race actually look. Well, again, I've addressed it a few times, and I'll kind of keep it short because, again, you can go back and watch what I've already said. I think it's going to end up being John Franklin as a starter, Sean White as the backup, and then Jeremy Johnson as a third string, and then we'll see how Woody Barrett, the incoming freshman, and redshirt freshman Tyler Queen sort out the last two spots. Let's see. Guys, I can only go for about 5 more minutes because Facebook only lets you go for 30 minutes total. So let's see. Clay Ingram asks, we've read about Marlon Davis moving up the depth chart ahead of Byron Cowart. Do you think Cowart will improve as he ages, or does his confidence take a big hit and hold him back? You know, he's a guy, we actually met with him this spring, and he was a very, 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 very impressive kid, because he basically, copped up to the mistakes he made as a freshman. Like some of the tweets he sent out, that sent Auburn fans into panic last year, about, oh, I'm a number one recruit and I want to learn. I'm still getting criticized. He said that was a freshman's mistake. He wishes he had handled certain things better, but he thinks that now with the benefit of time, the benefit of being around Carl Lawson and Montravius Adams, guys like that, who are older, who you can go to for guidance, I don't think there's any question that he's gonna get better. But as you're kind of mentioning, just because he gets better doesn't guarantee him a starting job, especially when you got a guy like Marlon Davidson who's come on and wowed everybody, not just the coaches, not just as the fellow defensive linemen. But I mean, again, writing the article like I did, when you talk to Alex Kozan, who's been in college for quite a while, and he says that Marlon Davidson is the most physically ready freshman he's ever seen to play in the SEC. That's a really, 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 really impressive statement, and something that Marlon can take into the offseason is a nice feather in his cap. Let's see here. William Charles Gunnings asked, they were saying JJ was ahead and it wasn't even close, but 8A proved nothing. What do we read when JJ waited 4 series before he entered the game? I don't think you read anything into that he waited 4 series to enter the game. Because, again, go back and look at how each of the quarterbacks worked with which unit. As Rhett Lashley, the offensive coordinator, talked about before 8A, their main focus was making sure that each quarterback got to work with the first and second team offense. So, again, guys, I wouldn't read anything into that. Again, I know that for fans and even for media members, you want to make all kind of snap judgments based on the spring game because that's the only time of the entire spring that again, the non-team members get to see these guys in action. But again, they show so little in the spring game. Hey, I'll use this as a point of reference. Myron Burton was the 8A MVP last year for the offense. He didn't even last through the first day of preseason camp last year. So guys, just don't read too much into the spring game results in that regard. A little concerned about the receiving core, Delane Harwood asked. Again, I think after a linebacker, that's fair. I'd say that's the biggest question mark on the team. But again, you would also maybe make the argument that they have more options than any unit on the team outside of defensive line. Again, Marcus Davis, Tony Stevens, you got two veteran seniors. Then you've got a junior coming back in Jason Smith, who people think is definitely going to come on strong. You got a redshirt freshman in Darius Slayton, who everyone seems to think is going to have a pretty decent freshman season. Then hey, they're bringing in a monster recruiting class, as everyone kind of knows. One of them already having been on campus in Kyle Davis, bringing in Nate Craig Myers from Florida, bringing in Marquise McLean, also from Florida, and Eli Stove, also from Florida. So three out of their, three of those receivers all being from Florida. So again, I can understand why you'd be worried about it because, hey, right now, on paper, hey, there's not a lot coming back that's experienced. But Marcus Davis is a very steady presence, and he's a guy that I think, he just seems to me to seem somewhat perturbed in a way. Not that he's like saying it and going up and on a rant like a media setting, but I think he's kind of mad that people don't automatically assume he's the go-to guy. And we're going to see that when we get to the season, hey, can he prove that? I mean, hey, he looked good in the 8A game, had multiple long catches, had the touchdown catch at the very end of the half from John Franklin III. And, hey, maybe that'll be a popular connection this fall is John Franklin III to Marcus Davis. Guys, I've only got 50 seconds left because, again, Facebook only limits this to 30 minutes. So I will take, let's see. I don't know if I can take any more questions, guys. So we're going to try to do this once a week. I'm going to try to do maybe every Friday. And I hope you guys maybe enjoyed this. Again, you can go back and replay this because it'll keep on a loop. It'll be saved here on Facebook. So again, guys, thanks so much for the questions. And if I didn't get to you this time, I'll certainly make sure to try to get to you next time. So again, this is Ryan Black with Auburn. Hey, sure, Matt, I'll do one last shout. Daniel Carlson, got a shout out to him. Arguably the best kicker. definitely the best kicker in the SEC and arguably one of the best in the country. So again, guys, thank you so much. This is Ryan Black from Auburn 247. Take care and thanks for joining in.